Okay, Munson here with the Portugal Club. As you can see, extraordinary, inspiring and transformational. Not much to live up to this morning. Louise Ross, how are you? Good morning to you.
Oh, hang on, excuse me. Not much to live up to. All right, I'll try and be my least extraordinary.
Not at all. This is the place where you can absolutely shine. I don't think it's going to be too difficult for
you're
you.
going to show my books. You're so sweet.
We have got the
you.
winding road to Portugal and the Women Who Walk. Women Who Walk is I'm looking at the wrong one because I've got them around the other way on the screen. This one is a green book, which is playing havoc with the green screen. But Women Who Walk, how 20 women from 16 countries came to live in Portugal. If that wasn't enough, we got 20 men from 11 countries sharing their stories as well. Your two books. Have you written a few more since I last saw you, or have you got some others in production?
No, I haven't. That was very spontaneous, Carl. I had no idea you're going to do that. So thank you very much. Because I don't even have my books in the background. That's, some authors usually do.
Yes, indeed.
Propped up. No more books. But what happened is that the women's book was so successful that I realized that that audience, women were buying and reading that book, was so keen, I think, to hear stories by women or about women, that I then created a podcast, which was basically a spin-off of the book. And the podcast is Women Who Walk. And I did that during the pandemic because, of course, we're all stuck. And I thought, I don't want to just sit at home and write because it's a very isolating experience. I want to continue to have conversations. And one of the ways to do that is to reach out and to do this online. And of course, as you do. And of course, podcasting was a way to do that. And it was also a way for me to skill up. I mean, I had absolutely no idea how to do it. And I was going to have to learn the technology. And so there was months went into researching how to do this. And then I went ahead and did it. And the women that I interview are not just in Portugal, they're around the world. So again, during the pandemic, it was a great way to connect with women who have made many country moves and who are now living around the world. And actually, this is a topic we may get into as we have our little discussion, because one of the reasons I was interested to chat to you about the Portugal Club, having listened to your little promo video, is that I do think it's really important wherever you are to have some kind of personal passion, avocation, project, whether you're still gainfully employed or whether you're retired. I mean, the term these days is passion project, and I certainly can identify that, because we do need something that gives us a sense of purpose and meaning.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Before we get into that, though, people are going to be seeing.
I can do it again.
Well, I am, and people need to know where to find these books.
Okay.
And the podcast. Just let me know.
Okay. Yeah. My website, louiseross.com.
Oh, that's easy. Okay.
Very easy. Yep. There's
my
name on the screen, and it's just myname.com.
And that's where you can buy the books and hear the podcast.
Yeah. There's on the what do we call it? The masthead. Yes. You'll see podcasts, and you just click on that, and then each interviewee has her own dedicated page. So there's just a headshot of each interviewee per podcast episode. Yeah.
So you've met some amazing people on.
My God.
I remember.
Seriously.
From the men's book as well, The Taxi Driver. Who, I mean, that really stayed in my mind. People's stories are amazing, aren't they? And I don't want to diminish. The use of the word story tends to lend a sort of tone of fiction, doesn't it, to things? And I don't mean it that way. I don't like how media uses the word story. But I mean, for want of a better word, you are showcasing the incredible lives of people. And that's what the Portugal Club's about. It's one thing to come to Portugal. And we were having a little preamble chat, weren't we, about all great in Portugal, and I'm the Portuguese Pollyanna. And what I've noticed, and the reason why we've reconnected, I think, just recently, is because I put a message out about, yikes, I'm telling people to come to Portugal. They're coming to Portugal. And some people are going home again, Louise. I can't believe it. Now, why might that be? And I think we've certainly hit upon something here with what you said earlier about the purpose, the passion project. It's quite important, is it not, to once you've settled in, and that does take some time, let's face it, and you'll have heard this from people, you know, it takes a little while to acclimatize, to make a home in a new country, to feel at home in a new country. But then there is the what I call the sort of pastel de nata threshold, certainly here in Portugal. And, you know, every day you've eaten a pastel de nata and drunk a coffee as you imagined before you got here, and you've drunk some of that cheap wine and eaten some of that lovely food underneath your beautiful blue sky. And there's that moment, isn't there? What now? What do I do now? And is this a thing that comes up with the people you speak to?
Absolutely. You know, I'm involved in a number of different groups online, as we are these days, and one is called Families in Global Transition, and of course it's a fantastic network of international families all over the world, and it's certainly a topic that comes up about relocation, settling, repatriation, and all the stuff in between. And I've moved countries myself. I mean, this is, you know, a topic I'm very familiar with. So I absolutely know and understand that honeymoon phase and way too many pastel de nata at the beginning. And then you're like, oh my God, I can't eat any more of that sweet stuff. I'll be the size of a house.
Yes.
And then as that fades away, certainly you're left looking at yourself, you know, like, what am I going to do? Or you're faced with yourself, I mean, what am I going to do? And I think, again, in your little promo video, the adage came up, wherever you go, there you are. And that is so true. It doesn't matter what country you've moved to or how wonderful it is or how fabulous the culture is. At some point, you're just faced with yourself again. So I think that that's sort of a universal issue. And and look, if I can get sort of a little deeper here, it's an existential.
I was going to ask you, faced with yourself. I mean, that's quite a thing, isn't it? How you've put it there.
Absolutely.
So let's get a little deeper. What does that mean? What have you seen for yourself and other people at that moment?
Well, it's a little bit of an existential issue because purpose and meaning comes from having a sense of identity. And let's say you've left your country of origin, you've left behind a particular identity that has given you meaning and purpose. So then you land in a new culture where you no longer have the identity that you had. And particularly if you come to Europe, an old Europe culture like Portugal, and you come from somewhere like America, which is new culture, you're a fish out of water. You have no sense of who you are, how you fit in, how things work. I mean, there are so many issues that are so confronting about coming to old Europe. And to try and sort of impose the old self on this new environment is just not going to work. So for a period of time, your sense of identity is totally suspended, which is very, very uncomfortable, uncomfortable. And it takes time to sort of, reestablish yourself in the new culture. And then let's say you're semi-retired or you're retired. That's even more challenging because if you've packed up your life, let's say again in the US, I'll use that as an example because I think many of the folks that you referenced in your little promo video who were returning are Americans.
Yeah.
So let's say you've packed up your life and you've retired and you've moved to old Europe, Western Europe, Portugal. And you've come from a workaholic culture, which it is, because I actually moved here from the US, so I can attest to this. And there are all sorts of issues I had in the beginning coming to this very slower, bureaucratic culture. Initially, I think one of the ways to adjust is to bring with you all the ways of doing things all the ways of operating that you used in your country of origin, and then try and impose those on the new culture, which then of course translates as judgment. Like, well, that's not how we did things at home. That's not how we do things. I don't know how they function like doing it that way. And so all of that stuff, which is kind of negative stuff, comes up. And I think, maybe for some Americans, clouds their perception of the new country and culture, and perhaps then does not help them adjust and find their way and establish a new identity and meaning and purpose here.
Oh my God, you've got such a good grasp of this. And as you said, from your own experience and the view of others, and so much so that we have something called the FIVE Evils of Portugal, which was filtered through from one of our conversations before. This is how bad it can get, right? I mean, we're not going to dwell too much on this, but it is setting a context and a scene. And I think you're providing some seriously good insight here into what can go on with these different trajectories. You've got the upward trajectory. Yes, I'm going to Portugal. It's going to be great, and it is, and we've all experienced that to some extent or another. But then I don't know if it's a graph, whatever, the lines on a page here of yes, the upside. I'll try and do it in a way that makes sense on the screen. Upward trajectory, positivity, lovely. And then something meeting you the other way, which is the culture, isn't it, that you mentioned, that can be a little bit difficult. And then we're at this where these two places meet, aren't we? Of the old personality in the new place, and the new place meeting one's old personality and winning formulas and those sorts of things that worked in the old country and made your life work, which are now possibly failing. And maybe we've got to that point, and this is where the FIVE Evils of Portugal exist. What are they?
Well, I started to hear this from some American expats, and I think I was seeing some of it online, and I did hear it from a friend from the US who, during the pandemic, packed up her life and moved here, and was confronted by the five evils, coming, I guess, from a level of comfort in the US. So one of those, I think you've mentioned this, is the mold issue.
Not me, the Portuguese.
I heard you mention it.
Mrs. M is the expert on mold. Yes, okay,
you were saying that Mrs. M had mentioned the mold.
Is that number one? Is that number one of the evils? Mold.
Well, I don't know what it is 1 through. I don't know the trajectory of the 5, but I just sort of have a sense of what the 5 are. And I mean, it was surprising to me because I'm lucky; I don't have mold where I am. So I have a little damp that I notice, but no big whoop. I mean, a little damp. But apparently it really is serious in some apartments, the black mold, which in the US, people are like, black mold, oh my God, this is so dangerous.
We're all going to die.
We're all going to die from black mold.
Yes.
And apparently you just learn to live with it. And if it causes a little, asthma or some bronchial issues, you just deal. You go to the doctor and maybe you get some kind of, prescription drug for it, which is not the way that people in the US deal with black mold. They have, people who are professional black mold eradicators come in and demold.
BMEs, black mold eradicators.
There you go.
In their phone book under BME. Okay, so it is a real problem. That I know we're making light of it, and this can be a shock for people.
Absolutely,
that's one of them. Black mold. Then,
black mold
difficult for people with respiratory.
Yes, definitely an issue for people with respiratory issues and particularly asthma as well. Now the barking dog issue. Now,
yes.
I am very familiar with the barking dog issue. I live in an apartment like a lot of people, and I'm surrounded by barking dogs, and it is very annoying. Mm-hmm. And we have a what is he? He is the administrator, I guess, of the complex. And if we have issue, we're supposed to email him. And perhaps this is another of the 5 evils, the bureaucracy. So, so you email our administrator and you lodge a formal complaint, and you hope to God that he'll do something about it, but he actually doesn't.
Okay. Right.
That's where maybe the bureaucracy comes in. So his response usually is call police. call the police and lodge a complaint. And I have done this. I mean, I've called the administrator, but I take issue with taking this outside the complex because the police have better things to do than turn up and deal with barking dogs. It is, in fact, illegal, apparently here in Portugal, to leave your dogs on your balcony and just sort of leave them there. But nevertheless, people do. They abandon their dogs for the day and just leave them there. And of course, the dogs go stark raving bonkers because they're not walked, they're abandoned, they're not taken care of. And so they bark profusely.
The owner is miles away at work, not oblivious to the situation. And then when they come home, the dog's happy again and it's not barking, and they just don't see this other side of their
No,
pet.
they don't. They don't. So I actually ended up just writing, maybe this is a resolution. I ended up just writing to my neighbour a very polite email saying that it had been recommended that I call the police and make a formal complaint, and that I thought that was a bit serious and perhaps we could just solve this ourselves. And one of the resolutions would be that you don't leave your dog on the balcony when you go out in the evening because it gets so distressed, it literally cries and barks nonstop till you get home, and sometimes that's 1 a.m., 1:30, and I'm not sure if you're aware how distressed. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. And it has never happened since. They keep the dog.
Excellent. I love that. I love hearing that resolution. That's great. Okay, and we are capable of that as human beings, aren't we? So fantastic.
We are.
That's 3 I've got there. So we went from black mold to barking dogs to bureaucracy. You haven't got a bee in them so far.
Yes. And that the Portuguese, I don't know that this is one of the 5 evils, but I'll just say this, that they don't like confrontation. So it's not as though I would recommend you go bang on the door of your neighbour and say, listen, I'm really fed up with your barking dog, because that's not going to work. There needs to be a gentle, diplomatic approach.
As you've exemplified there,
which was a letter, and I must say I wrote it in English, which is really not that respectful. I mean, if you could write it in perhaps Portuguese, even if you use Google Translate, that might be more respectful of your neighbour, of your Portuguese neighbour.
Well said, thank you.
All right. So the other one, I think it might be the dog poop. Actually,
yes, that's right. So dogs feature quite heavily in this life here. Yes, no question about that. It's a problem all over the world, of course, but there is a uniquely laissez-faire attitude, you might say, that people notice in Portugal.
Yeah, but for those who think it's really bad, I've got to tell you, I've been here about 10 years now. It used to be a lot worse.
Did it really? No, I didn't expect to be having this conversation, but I'm so glad to hear that the trend is positive. Okay, well, thank you for sharing.
And do you know why it's actually better? Because the internationals were up in arms about all the dog poop.
Okay. And they were exemplifying a new way of managing the waste.
They were demonstrating with plastic bags how to pick up poop. And in fact, I have stories from some international friends saying that the Portuguese would say, "What are you doing? Somebody else will pick it up. You don't,
We've got a B day for that. Oh, no.
Yeah, we've got the cleaners. Basically, the cleaners will pick that up. Well, of course, they're referring, I guess, to the trucks that come around and do a little bit of street sweeping, but they don't get all the dog poop. Anyway, so I think by example, the internationals were shaming the Portuguese into picking up the poop.
I've had dogs for a long time now. And I've got to say, honest share, I didn't always do that. It was a cultural shift in the UK where I'm from as well. It started to happen. And people were getting fined if they didn't do it. And it just changed the culture, didn't it? And people saw other people doing it and thought, actually, that's probably the right thing to do. And not everyone does it, of course, because that's human nature. But generally speaking, a lot of people do. And so you see that trend here as well. There is a resonance or, morphic resonance as more people do it.
Pressure.
Hundreds and a little bit of shaming and social pressure.
Exactly. So actually the dogs, the poop, the animal welfare are way up there, because there's also been a lot of distress, I think, from the international community around animal welfare,
Yes.
the treatment. But I'm not sure that let's just put one of the 5 evils as you know, the dogs and the animal welfare and so on. I think one of the others is what was coming to my, back to the home. Yeah. Poor insulation.
Insulation,
yes,
okay.
Yes,
yeah.
Poor insulation, which is construction basically, that you can hear your neighbours, that it's cold, it's damp, that the wind whistles through the closed doors.
Yeah. Okay, well,
we got the 5?
I think there's 5 to go
5.
out there, and I think other people may well be screaming at the podcast saying, "You didn't do this, say this, that, or the other." But point made, that I think it's interesting that people have got to such a stage where they are meeting to talk about these things, and you even have the conceptualization of the 5 evils. The fact that 5 evils exist, it's almost like a hashtag on Twitter, isn't it? The 5 evils, and their lives have changed from the upside of drinking Portuguese wine whilst enjoying Portuguese food and having a pastel de nata in the morning and living the rest of their life in 300 days of sunshine, into you'll never guess what happened now. And something's shifted at this point, hasn't it? When your mind is on evils and judgment and nursing those sort of grievances rather than what you originally came here for. And it's important, isn't it, to remember that we didn't come here thinking that's the place where I can get some really good 5 evils. We came with an entirely different agenda in the first place, didn't we? So what happened and what can happen? And you're clearly somebody who has a very good understanding of human nature and this curve, this journey for people, and what can be done about it, because that's really what the Portugal Club's about. You know, of course, Portugal is an inexpensive place to have a retirement. It's a good place to come and escape from something or someone else. But those motivations tend to stall after a while, don't they? So what's there for people if they are at this point of the 5 evils threshold, we can now call it? What can be done? It's a serious issue, isn't it? And some people are thinking, actually, yeah, it's great that this conversation is occurring, because when I get there, I want to know what to do about it. So what to do about it?
Well, I'm not sure that I can help anyone deal with or eradicate the 5 evils. I mean, I think taking action, of course, helps. So, for instance, I think for a long point I was moaning and groaning about the dog noise, and it was so empowering when I finally just sat down and wrote that letter.
Yeah.
And posted it to my neighbour's door. We've never actually talked in person. But I think when you can take action on the smallest things, it is very empowering. So whether it is trying to get to know your neighbour so that they're willing. I mean, actually, I left a Christmas card for my neighbour upstairs, because a lot of apartments, not just the insulation issue, but they're either marble or wood flooring. So if your neighbour upstairs wears heels, or my neighbour upstairs wears, he's a single gentleman, wears leather-soled shoes, and he's kind of hyper. So when he gets home from work, you know, I hear patter, 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 and he has a stationary bike. So I hear patter, 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 patter. And then once, you know, he's settled down, he gets on his stationary bike.
I see. Okay, so you have quite a good understanding of his lifestyle now.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I know him well. So I left a Christmas card for him this year, and it was actually like a little olive branch, because literally it was like Santa offering a gift, the image on the front of the card. And I just said, Senor, and I know his name, Senor, I won't say his name in case anybody else knows him. May I encourage you to slip on some soft-soled shoes when you get home?
Yeah, here they are. Presents.
Yes, I've just left a pair of slippers on your doorstep as a Christmas gift. No, anyway, so these things are empowering because they help you resolve the most basic issues. And I think initially it was a little passive aggressive because it didn't calm down for a while, but then it did. It really did. I think he slips off his leather-soled shoes and he slips on some flip-flops or something. I don't know, really. Fantastic. But it's changed. So in terms of the 5 evils, I think if there are a lot of animal welfare volunteer groups now.
Yes.
Do that, get involved, volunteer, so that you can feel like you're doing something about the dog issues or the poop issues or the whatever it is, the insulation issues. Communicate with your neighbours, a gift, a card or a letter, asking them to perhaps wear soft-soled shoes. The black mold, God, I don't know. It's challenging.
Well,
I mean,
it's interesting what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt, but you know, clearly you're a one-woman noise abatement society, and you've got a lot to teach people about how to go about this. And I think it's absolutely right. You know, you can get irked by these things, and the more you nurse them and have grievances about them and don't do anything about it, I think the worse it gets. So it's really important to be in action, and as you clearly have been. Yeah. And I noticed about you as well, Louise, you're not just about having people wear different footwear in the flat above you and have their dog being less distressed. You've written these books. You know, you are on purpose, aren't you? And I think we're talking about another level here, aren't we? Yes, definitely meet the challenges and do something about them. That's kind of functional and right and helpful. But I think another level is where the transformation and where the extraordinary and where the inspiring is, and that's, you know, about this territory as well, don't you? Was that like a conscious choice, or are you just like that anyway?
Well, this is a nice shift actually, because we can sort of dig a little deeper here too. It is a bit. I mean, my background is psychology. I think I've mentioned that to you before. Yeah. So like you, I'm just very curious about people, and I'm very curious about different cultures and different ways of being. So I think after my honeymoon phase ended, and the first probably 2 years were just extraordinarily difficult.
Really?
Yeah, moving here from the US and moving from a work-obsessed culture into a culture that was just, you know, much gentler and slower. I actually had a number of physical accidents. Wow. Because it literally, I think the universe was basically sending me a message. I had to slow down. Right. And in fact, I think in the introduction to the women's book, I talk about that, because I slipped as I was racing out of my apartment, racing to get to the train station.
Let's do this. Yes.
Racing.
Oh, like that. So much so the headphones fell out.
Yeah, I've got to stop fiddling with them. And I slipped and I seriously sprained both my ankles. Both my ankles. And there I was lying on my back in the car parking area at the base of my apartment block with my feet in the air, busily swelling. Yikes. And I was laid up with crutches for about 2 weeks, really unable to walk. So during that period, I had to do like a come to Jesus kind of moment on the couch, which is, what the hell am I going to do? What am I going to do in this country? You know, the honeymoon period is over. And now I can't even walk, let alone run and dash around and do this. Yes. So anyway, one of the things that I was very aware is that I'd already started to make some extraordinary internationals with wonderful stories. And I just found this mind expanding. And just by being open and listening to other people's journeys gave me insight into the experience of the enormous opportunity of being in a culture or a country that seems to attract people from all over the world who have something to teach us, that we can learn from one another if we're willing to listen. Yeah. So that's how the books actually came about. And that's when this passion project started, I guess, which gave me significant meaning and purpose in being here. Because I think it gave me a reason to participate actively in all the international networking groups and clubs. It gave me a reason to get out and do things that I wouldn't normally want to do, like happy hours. I mean, I'm not a small talky person, but if I went along and, you know, sipped on my beverage, inevitably I'd have a conversation or end up listening to someone talk about something that was absolutely fascinating, and I was always learning.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is so important when you come into a new culture as a naive newbie, is to just be open to learning. And we do that by virtue of listening, just hearing others, hearing their stories and listening to their journeys. We can learn something about ourselves. And in that experience too, if again you're open to it, there can be the spark of something like, oh, hang on, this person volunteers for like a homeless shelter. I'd like to get involved in that. Or this person volunteers for the dog shelter. Oh, I love dogs. I'd like to get involved in that. So in those conversations and in those sort of listening moments, there can be a spark of something that can open a door to an opportunity or a passion or a way of being in this new culture that can give you meaning and purpose. But you have to be open to it. So long as you're kind of bringing the old identity and the old ways of doing things and the old ways of seeing things, you're always sort of pushing back the possibility of something new opening up.
And there is a golden cage of retirement, isn't there? Because if you're comfortable in your new place, your new country, and you, as we want to do as human beings, we want to do that Maslow's hierarchy thing, don't we? And get all those needs sorted out. And then you might kind of dull your edge a little bit, mightn't you? Having taken care of all those needs, being sat in your lovely house, you know, with all the things you've ever wanted to do, because now you can afford to do them. And that thing, that dynamic you've just talked about there of getting out despite yourself, because you might not like small talk at cocktail, meetups and so on. That overwhelming, overarching sense of purpose has propelled you out of possibly a kind of mind-numbing discomfort, a mind-numbing comfort, not discomfort, like a dulling comfort, or in a way. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to yeah. And there you are. I suspect as well you will have been infectious in that way, because at these meetings they think, oh, there's Louise. She's going to be asking me about my. I just came here to talk about dog poo and black mold, and she wants to talk to me about my journey here. Well, you would have inspired. I think you will have enlivened others with this pursuit and endeavor of yours.
Well, you know, I actually mentioned this to someone the other day. We all need to be seen and heard. We need to feel as though we can shine. And I think when you step away from the old identity, I think one of the things I didn't mention is when you do step away from the old identity, something in you dies. An old ego identity dies.
Wow.
And there's some grief that comes with that. Yes. Because when in, let's say, the country of origin, you're identified as a teacher, a chef, or a cook, or a lawyer, or whatever, and that's your identity within that environment, and people know you for that, and then suddenly you're out of that environment, nobody knows you're a great chef or you're this amazing teacher.
Yes.
That part of you has died, and something of the flame that comes with that, the skills that you've had, that you've been able to use and express, the flame. I'm not quite sure how to say that, but anyway, something.
I get it. I really get it.
Yeah, that ego identity has died, and suddenly nobody recognizes you for that. I mean, one of our tendencies is to then sort of talk about who we were.
Yes.
And, it's actually a really interesting experiment to not do that. To allow yourself to be in this luminal place, or liminal, what's the word? This empty, this empty space where you're sort of nobody. You're sort of just transparent and floating and nobody. It's frightening to be there, to be sort of to be a nobody, but to allow yourself to sort of start again from this place of nothingness. You can kind of recreate yourself.
You can. That's the upside, isn't it? But I do notice, you know, one of the most popular questions I get asked by Americans is, "What do you do?" Which presumably gets turned into, "What did you used to do?" When it comes to retirement. And you're offering something else there, aren't you? So, and again, you know, you don't often hear people say, "I'm going to be moving to Portugal to let a part of my personality die." No one ever
that's
says
what happens.
But that is what happens, isn't it? And perhaps people need to be prepared for that as well. That's an incredible insight and gift to people potentially.
Absolutely. You need to grieve the old life. You know, when people pack up their homes and they move here.
Yes. Well said. Well said.
Oh my God. Let's say you actually lived in a house and you pack that up and you sell it and you move here and you move into an apartment, and you've never lived in an apartment, or you've never lived in sort of an apartment block or a community, which is an apartment block. There's a lot of grief that comes with that, with leaving behind a home, a freestanding home with perhaps a yard and a fence and so on.
These among so many things are the unknown areas, the territories that people will find themselves in. And
absolutely.
In many ways, am I right in saying it's probably not optional?
What do you mean?
Well, there's an inevitability about these things happening, isn't there? And they are not things that you see on the Pollyanna on my list of, generally speaking. Yeah, you come to Portugal for the X, Y, and Z. It's great. We love it here. We're not really selling those things.
Well, no, we don't tend to talk about country moves, about it being a death or an ego death or
not selling it, is it?
No. Yeah, you know, I remember when I first arrived here and suddenly the new marketing director, the Portugal's new head of marketing or whatever, and all these wonderful videos on YouTube about Portugal, and of course it was hugely successful because suddenly, you know, tourism picked up, and then the immigration of people moving here and so on. I mean, nobody's going to talk about, but don't forget, when you move to a foreign country, you're going to go through this process of grieving what you've left behind, and that there will be an ego death that comes with it that will cause you to have an existential crisis.
Well, Louise, you say that, but I think with the right advertising agency and the right voiceover, you know the guy who does a lot of the voiceovers for Portugal, he's like, "Come to Portugal, experience ego death and the grief of your past life in beautiful surroundings," and some music, Fado in the background. I think we could. I think it could work.
Okay, so there you go, Carl. I can see a new project. Voiceover.
I'll let somebody else do that. But I mean, in all seriousness, you make an amazing. Well, you've made several incredible points and introduced people to these insights that may well, or you've given them insight into these situations that may well occur for them, and you're putting a name and a form to it, which is a real gift, because a lot of people might be going through that and they might not have a name for it or understand what's going on. And from your psychology background, from your interest in people, and I dare say your love of people, that is a real gift to people that you're offering there today. So I thank you for that. And that's from your 10 years, did you say, being here in Portugal, and your hard-won experience for yourself, and 2 years of struggle and a Jesus experience on the sofa. I mean, it's all there. It's all there. And I'm minded to share a little meme. Sorry to obscure you for just moment, but this is shared on the show this morning. On the upside, your presence on this planet is incredibly valuable, and you being here during this time means you have a special contribution to make to humanity. So stop handing your divine potential over to the limiting beliefs of our current society. Be brave and step into your greatness. Do you think there's scope for that when you come into a new country as an expat? Might we have that as an aspiration rather than the constant fight against black mold?
Yes, but I think that's a little inflated, that meme. I mean, I think encouraging to people to step into their greatness, and if you don't, then you're like a complete fail.
Yes, actually, well said. There's me again on the overblown positivity and Pollyanna side. Yeah, and I have had a little, not a pushback, but I've had a little bit of a review and notice about this. The Portugal Club, which we're all about not exposing, illustrating, highlighting extraordinary, inspiring, transformational people and things that are going on in Portugal. But it's also very important to not have that as too high a bar against which you can fail. Is that the point you're making?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another thing to be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, maybe some people are coming here to, step out of a crazy busy life or step away from something and to just sort of just step down and relax. And in a way, I think I felt that's what Portugal offered me. And I feel that I actually have had extraordinary success here. And that's because I'm on my own. I don't have family or partner. I don't have the issues that a lot of people are dealing with around black mold and the 5 evils. I mean, I'm also very self-motivated and I'm an introvert. So I'm quite happy on my own working on projects. And I'm also a project person. I'm always looking for projects. But I'm not aspirational in the way that some of these memes encourage us to be. I'm not looking for greatness. I'm just looking to, express myself and to be my best self and to grow and to learn and to understand. And one of the things I didn't mention actually is in those first couple of years, I read an enormous amount, everything I could get my hands on about Portugal, whether it was non-fiction or historical fiction. I just consumed in order to try and understand the things that I was seeing that caused me some grief. Like, why do they do that? Why do they behave that way? And so long as I kept reading, I continued to sort of fill my coffers of understanding about the way Portuguese culture is the way it is. So that now I can just say, yeah, I understand that. I get it. I totally get it. I'm so well informed because of the reading that I have done. And so that things don't really bother me as much anymore.
That's amazing. And thank you for that, for tempering the meme driven aspirational culture that can sometimes, I mean, the way you describe it there though, to be your best self and to understand life and have a contentment that I get from you. I mean, that's enough, isn't it?
Isn't it? I mean, I have one friend, we're actually not really in touch anymore, but she moved several times before she finally settled in Lisbon. And she has a background in photography, and she's now actually just painting. I mean, I think she's become very involved in a creative community in Lisbon of artists and so on. And her painting and her watercolors are very naive and rather delightful. She's never going to be a Rembrandt, for God's sakes, but she's just enjoying exploring. She's very creative anyway, but exploring this new modality of creative expression. I mean, she is a photographer by training and she does beautiful photography work, but this is different for her. So perhaps this is what she's meant to be doing here, and perhaps that's enough.
Absolutely. And being less of what we're not, I suppose, and getting rid of some of those old habits. And these are the things, this is what we've been talking about, isn't it? Whatever it is that has been possibly less than helpful in your life may well represent itself or represent itself in the new space here. So I got to thank you. I'm feeling that a part 2 is in order at some point. There's a lot, and 3 and 4. Probably a 10-part series on.
Look, I mean, there really is a lot to process. I mean, I'm not going to toot my own horn too much, but I think after 10 years and a lot of learning, I do understand, or I have a lot of insight about what it takes to adjust to a culture that I think is very, very different. and challenging at a number of levels. But so long as you keep focusing on what doesn't work, it won't work. I mean, my mother used to say, if you don't like that, just don't focus on it. Focus on something else.
Thanks, Mum.
No, it actually wasn't such a bad thing to say to a young, stroppy teenager.
Quite. And then it suddenly has a profound importance, doesn't it? It becomes more and more profoundly important as the years pass, doesn't it? Even if it didn't make a lot of sense at the time. But she was right. She is right. Yeah. And I think you should toot your own horn with this. You do seem to have a great level of wisdom and insight and perception on this. So thank you for being here and starting.
You are welcome.
I think I do. I would love to talk to you again. It was great fun the first time, and it's been great today. Thank you so much. LouiseRoss.com is where people can find your books, can't they? And subscribe to the podcast. Yeah, and reach out to. I mean, are you talking to people specifically about this, or are you focusing more on the books and the podcast?
Talking to them about what?
I mean, in terms of consultancy, you know, if somebody wanted to learn more from you and how you've dealt with this, are you formulating a service of any kind for?
No. I mean, this conversation kind of comes up in the podcast because I have a particular formula that I follow, which is place of origin, tell us about that, set a scene, country moves, what was it like, moving countries, what's it like to integrate into a new culture, how's it been for you learning new languages? And so all of these subjects come up during those conversations. And generally I just avail myself of the interviewee and allow her to sort of talk through that. And ultimately the journeys are similar by virtue of our, human experience being very similar, moving countries and adjusting to culture and understanding differences. So it's sort of I suppose, a repetition of questions and answers on the podcast, just from women from very different backgrounds and different countries and different languages.
Presumably very therapeutic for them because of that.
Yes, and perhaps therapeutic for the people listening too, because I think probably the people who listen are considering moving countries or have moved countries and sometimes maybe feel alone in their experience or their isolation in having moved country and it's just so overwhelming or too difficult. Or sometimes it's just great to be able to hear someone's story and go, oh my God, I just had exactly the same experience. Thank God I'm not alone with this.
Superb. I don't want to say goodbye, but we have to at some point.
Yes.
Let's make that point now, and I will be in touch to have another conversation with you in due course.
Always love chatting with you, Carl.
Well, thank you so much, Louise. LouiseRoss.com to go to for subscription to the podcast and the formula that you were hearing about there from Louise, and to buy the books. Take care and bye for now. Thank you so much, Louise. Muito obrigado. E até a próxima.